It's 8:30. We call Sawyer County Finance Committee meeting to order. Ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Ryan Kingsley,
Here.
John Righeimer is excused, Stacy Hessel. Here. Tom Duffy.
Here.
Dale Schleter.
Yeah.
Here, quorum.
Let the record indicate we have a quorum. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 4, certification compliance and open meeting laws.
This meeting has been noticed to the public and indicated as required by section 1924 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. Number 5 is the agenda. The agenda is set. Public comments. Ms. Summer.
Linda Zilmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Berthoud, Wisconsin, Edgewater property owner. And also by way of clarifying my comments this morning with regard to ambulance billing and also services in Edgewater. I served as a secretary, treasurer, and bookkeeper for the BFC ESD. I'm familiar with the service that was provided there. Going back to 1963 or 64, when my grandfather had his heart attack, it was Birchwood that came out. And ever since I've been back in the area, it has always been Birchwood that has served Edgewater. Edgewater was not considered in the ambulance service study that was done when Sawyer County considered going to full-time ambulance service and where another ambulance station was located. It was only this morning that I heard the video from the March 2nd meeting of the Public Safety Committee that made a lot of misrepresentations to that committee about what the situation is. The Portage case is not similar at all. Edgewater first tried to bring this matter to county board when Bill Voigt was the Public Safety Committee chair, and Elaine Nyberg and Jim Bassett represented the town of Edgewater. Unfortunately, the town was not able to get the written request into the county before those terms expired. This should have been resolved back at that time. And I think at this point, the only way that everybody get all the facts correct is to have a public meeting, which would include Sawyer County supervisors, Edgewater Town board members, and representatives from both the ambulance services to get the record straight in the levels of service and what has been going on. So I would appreciate if that could be considered. And also, please look at the, I believe it's last month's Public Safety Committee meeting materials. In there, the summary report on ambulance billings, which I believe is probably provided mostly by your new contracted billing provider, gives a much better picture of ambulance revenues. And also maybe there can be some discussion. I think it's been a problem in the past as well as going forward. When it comes to these accounting matters, who's really responsible for chasing down a lot of this detail? Is it the ambulance director or is it within the finance part of administration? Because the other thing I heard at this on the video from the second is that there's a difficulty in getting some historical information from the previous provider. And I don't know that ambulance directors have time to chase that down. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody out there
There is one person online.
for public comment? Or
No hands raised.
number 7, approve the minutes of the previous meeting of February 9th.
A second.
Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Ms. Hessel to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion?
Okay.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 8, Treasurer Department report.
Janine is unable to make it.
Did she put any material together for us? Okay, thank you. Number 9, Native American Property Taxation Treaty of 1854. Update impact of appellate court decision.
Just a update on where we're at. So the town of Bass Lake has put together, has been working with the tribe on a list of properties. I think there's maybe some properties that they believe are currently being taxed that we need to be removed from the tax rolls. So now they're working with our tax assessing office to start the process of determining the values and removing them. Town of Hayward has a shorter list that they're still verifying as well. So that's still coming together. The other update is that in the governor's proposed budget, there is a provision in there to make government entities, local governments that are gonna lose that value of property essentially whole to replace that tax revenue. It's on a sliding scale. So the first year you will get the full value of what you lose. And then every year after, you would reduce 10% for 10 years.
So we're gonna get our percentage in it.
Essentially, that's the governor's. budget. So.
Yeah.
We'll see where that goes from there.
Questions?
On native issues, I found the Hayward paper, Andy, were native, they have some kind of a celebration of all the foliage and all the foliage is taking their land and their cemeteries and bringing people out. Are we involved in that, or what is that?
I read that in the paper. I think
It's
that's,
just their 100 year
Yeah.
or 75th year or something.
I think I was read that it's 100 years that go up, the gates were put in place.
Was that kind of a protest, are they looking for a compensation, or?
That I don't know. We had no conversations about.
You know any more about that?
I don't.
Any other questions for Andy regarding number 9?
I think there'll be other updates also.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you know. Number 10, Finance Department report. Mike.
All right, so the first thing I'd like to talk about is the sales tax. Leonard Andy Glover's control, if we could scroll down that. What I put in here is, when I started last July, I saw that sales tax is a pretty significant revenue source, so I worked on a spreadsheet that does projections. So last year, when I did it in July, the projection showed 2.85 million, a little bit over that. For 2022, we ended up getting 2.857, so it was within about $6,500. This year could be up, last year actually, well, pretty good. So I feel comfortable at least getting an idea of where we're going to be from it. So what I do is I take every time we get a new settlement month from the state, I plug that in, come up with an average. So here I've got January, February, take an average. And then I take the average of the previous 4 years of the next month versus the average. And I apply the average of that to the average for the months for this year and come up with an amount. So like for March, and everything that's in a projection is in red. So March takes that average of 206,000 for January and February, which February was another outstanding month. Last February was too. I don't know why it is. Valentine's Day, I don't know, people spend a lot of money, but whatever, it's working. And then I take that average of 85%. So March is typically 85% of the previous 2 months average in years past. So that comes up to 175,733. So that's kind of where I would project this year's March to come in. And I carry that out through, this is very early, but we'd hit 3 million by this projection. And we budgeted 2.6. No, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but last year it proved to be fairly accurate. So well, keep an eye on after every month, it gets a little more accurate because you have more of a distributed year going.
Good.
So that's where I come up with that. Just wanted to fill you guys in on that. Any questions on that? You say that's a guarantee? I do that, it's a guarantee, but.
Good information to have. Thank you.
So then on the budget update. There's not a lot change, because we're still looking at 2022. We don't have a lot of activity for 23, so we're still working on closing out 22. So that's what I'm continuing to report on. There hasn't been a lot of change, but if we go down to kind of that bottom line sheet where I've got the revenue and expense totals. I think one more, yeah. So right now we're at 98% of revenues budgeted for the year. And again, I've always backed out that transfer from fund balance into the general fund revenue, which I'm hoping we won't have to do. If I back that out, we're at 160% of budget. And then if I back out that unexpected funding from LATCF. We're at just over 103%. So on the revenue side, we've done really well for the year. We're still closing stuff out, but it's getting little and smaller, especially on the general fund side of adjustments we're making. And then on the expense side, we're at 90%. And then if I back up that transfer to the special funds, which really is just to HHS and even further, really just for placements, then we're at 97.88%. So we're a little bit under on the expense side, a little over on the revenue side, which is what we would hope for. If you want to go to the next slide, this breaks down HHS and highway, which are our other two big funds. And we did see some revenue come in on HHS. So we're at 92%. If I back out that transfer, we'd be at 107%, which is really strong. And then on the expense side, we're still at 86%. The caveat I have for that is we've got about $500,000 of unbilled placement costs that we still will have come in. So if nothing else happened and I put that in, we'd be right at a break even pretty much for HHS and would not have to do that transfer. So that's what I'm hoping for. Within HHS, we'll have probably some carry forwards that we'll have to bring to the board to approve. So that it could change a little bit, but we're gonna have a very minimal transfer, which again, is what I was hoping for when I started analyzing the financials. And then on the highway side, it's a little worse than last month. We had more expenses closed out. That one we're still working on closing, and that's a little bit more of a process even than HHS. We've got Clifton Larson Allen was our auditing firm coming on March 6th and 7th to help with that. They helped with the process last year because Janine had transitioned out of highway department and the treasurer. And so now with Randy and myself, we're doing that again, and we feel like we'll be able to take it from this point on. But so we won't really have highway closed out until at least middle of April.
Isn't Teresa doing some of that?
She is.
Oh, okay.
She's doing a lot of the lead work,
Okay.
but some of the heavier accounting. we don't go with.
Dale, do we know how many people are at Lincoln Hills now? Is there two or we don't know?
Well, one was when we coming back to the county here this week, wasn't it? Back when we were- That changes monthly.
Thank you. Good job, Mike.
Then moving on to the investment review and update. If you remember at last month's meeting, we made the decision to always be a month behind on this because some of our statements weren't coming in enough time to update. So now we've got the complete January data and it looks really good. If you look at our interest earned year to date, which at this point is 1 month, it's $65,000, which is a third of what we had all of last year. And last year ended a lot stronger than was budgeted for because it was about August that we started seeing some increase in returns. So we're actually already exceeded the budget for this year for revenue because when I set that, rates were under 1%. And at the time, we had only taken in 15,000 for all of 2022. So we're gonna far exceed the budget.
So what are we getting for interest now?
We're getting a little bit over 4, which is pretty good. And we are working on setting up relationship with ADM, which we talked about at last month's meeting too. We just have to get the paperwork signed, the application, and the CDs from there were really attractive. So that's likely where we do some issuance of CDs.
And the CD is pretty liberal as far as cashing in the money. It's no longer a year or 2 years, isn't it?
Well, you can set them as low as 3 months. Yeah. We would probably stagger some 6, 12, and 18 months.
Yeah.
Or maybe 6, 9, and 12. 12. At this point, since I'm still fairly new, I wouldn't commit ourselves to more than
Yeah.
would feel safe doing. As I get more comfortable with the cash flow by month, well, probably start doing a little bit more. But really, right now, the money market is really competitive with even locking in at the CD. The feds are talking about raising the rates potentially one more time. And that's when we want to start locking into some CDs, because then at that point, it's gonna level out possibly. If inflation gets under control, they could start actually pulling back the rates. So then the money market would follow that.
Okay,
And you can see the ARPA and opioid unspent balances right there too. And the ARPA is all committed except for about $50,000.
can you give us an update on the opioid money, where that's going, or is that later?
We haven't made any decision.
Yeah, that's, right now it's in the account. The public health has put together, I guess I call it a strategic plan. Around to attack the overdose issues and with the opioid money. So like yesterday, CDC, we started a draft budget of how to allocate those funds.
Okay.
Different elements, I think. I think you'll see part of that at the county board meeting. You'll see the outline of the plan. And the budget should be finalized shortly thereafter. I'm giving them a target number of, it's a range, but 40 to 50,000 a year.
Okay,
Is what we think we'll be able to spend for the next dozen years at least. At the admin meeting and at the county board, we have some additional opioid settlements coming in from the retailers. So we're roughly going to get just under 500,000. Now we should expect to get 750 to a little bit more than that. It will be our total settlement.
okay,
So what do we plan to use these funds for?
There's different parts of the plan, whether it's prevention, recovery. Yeah, there's prevention.
Yeah.
I guess I'll call it treatment and then recovery. There's different phases of the plan.
So what do we do with the money? We contract out with somebody?
Some will be contracts, some will be in-house just to I guess operate the plan.
So where are we with that? We aren't meeting yet.
Not doing anything yet. You'll see the plan at the county board meeting.
Yeah.
They're gonna give a presentation on the plan they put together. They've been working with CJCC primarily to put it together to this point. But there'll be a plan and a budget to go with the different tasks within the plan.
So are you gonna oversee all of that? Who's gonna oversee it all?
Public health.
Okay.
I think over the however many months we've been talking about it, CJC kicked things around for a long time, but ultimately public health has done the most work leading up to this. They're their best position. A lot of this is coming out of their community health plan. They already have the community health indicators. They know what treatment tools and recovery options are available in the community already. So they're plugging in the gaps to do that. And I think the other thing that they'll lean on heavily is more of a evidence-based tools. CJCC for a while, there was a lot of talk about buying a building to have a recovery center and different, I don't know, just brainstorming. But I think when you hear public health presentation, you'll see how a lot of what they want to do is based on things that have a track record of success and how to treat. Preventing opioids in the community, but then once we have people that have the struggles with opioids, how to get them into recovery, and then once they're through that, to give them a landing place so that they, I said, the environment around them changes, because if you just put them back to where they were, they fall into old habits, I guess.
Are you tying that into the court system too, with all these opioid problems and?
That's tied into through our drug treatment court, though. It's getting up and running. The work with Justice Point.
Yeah.
So the diversion program and the treatment court, that's really the tie to the court system.
All of this discussion is number 13. Just name.
Well, maybe we'll learn more by the time we get there.
Yeah, but as far as the funds, that's what we have in-house so far. And then we'll get annual installments from all the different settlements. At one point, there was some talk about the ability for counties to get more money up front, essentially finance your settlement and bring more money at the front end, but that conversation has cooled because when they looked at it further, you wouldn't get all of your opioid proceeds that way. You might only get like 80% of what your total settlement was if you wanted more money up front. There's provisions in the actual settlement that require at least 85 or 90% of your funds to be spent on certain things. So you wouldn't have that much money available. So that's,
So does the county board make that
the
decision?
county board would make that decision.
And who recommends that to the county board? They don't know.
The counties association has been working on that with the bond council to put a plan together that counties could opt into.
Okay.
But they're, at this point, they pulled that off, and it's not an option.
Okay.
When you talk about the people, I don't know how you word that. I guess I'll cut right to the chase. Do we still use that transition house? And would that be involved in part of them steps that could be used?
I think it could be, it's not been part of the discussion, but we still have that, it's still is part of our mental health and AODA program. But I think at some point, we're gonna look at how it's being used and whether it would be better suited to be more of a recovery. That's my opinion.
I think they want to get into the schools to prevent early prevention.
Well, education would probably go a long way, best they can. Good. Okay,
I think I'll leave more of it to public health to explain more of the details of what they're proposing.
It's a lot of money, you know.
so let's use it wisely and help the community.
And make it sustainable so that it.
But is
not
there
just
a
a
body in charge that's gonna recommend to the board, and who specifically is gonna come to the board and say, this is what I recommend?
Julia,
Okay,
public health has been leading this with her team. So they put the plan together, she'll present it to the board. Within that, you're gonna hear about tasking somebody within public health to be, and I don't know, we're doing some staffing changes there. But there needs to be somebody on an ongoing or daily basis to quarterback, making sure all the pieces are moving. And so somebody within public health will be that person.
Yeah.
That's gonna be their recommendation to the board.
And overseeing the funds.
Would we give you the budget? The board would approve the budget.
Thank you. Any other questions for him?
but is there gonna be an accounting at the end of the show to somebody?
Yeah, no, we have to do that. We have to maintain these funds as separately held and track how they're used. So if they're
Did
used
you
for,
report to somebody federally? What we've done?
No, because it's given to.
yeah, I don't think we have, I mean, there could be an audit, but I don't think this is not a fund where we have to report in. Like ARPA, we have to file, I think it's semi-annual reports for how the ARPA funds are used. The LATCF funds that Mike mentioned, when we start using those, we'll have to report in on how those are used. The opioid funds, we need to track them and maintain. In the settlement, there are specific uses for those funds, so we have to make sure we spend the funds that way. But I don't believe that we have to report into the federal government at all, because it's not federal funds, there's settlement dollars coming from the retailers and distributors.
Interesting. Is Julie able to do this, or are we gonna have to hire someone else to specifically do this?
I think she won't be be doing this on a day-to-day basis, but somebody within, we're not gonna have to hire anybody additional that we don't have on board already.
Yeah.
I believe what the plan is we're gonna shift somebody that was doing some of the COVID work over to working on opioids.
Okay, we'll move forward. Number 12, EMS ambulance billing financial update.
If you want to go down. What's
Hang on.
happening? Little glitch. Well, all this time.
And this is new. I assume this.
I've never seen that either. I could get you. But
It's new on my screen too.
Can I send it to you in an email and pull it up?
yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be easier.
you can send it to me.
Yeah.
While we're waiting, it's quiet because the Badgers lost last night. That's why it's so quiet.
Yeah, that ruined their chance of the NCAA.
Yeah.
There we go. All right, want to go down a couple slides. We added a month, obviously, to this data, but the problem now that we're gonna run into is we don't have anything from last year, from January through March, and then the big dump in April after we had hired LifeQuest, so it's gonna be a little bit skewed again for a while, but come May, we'll have good data we'll start looking at. So I added an aging report, and this is ever since we started with LifeQuest. As you can see, we've hovered right around $500,000. It had been whittled down each month until December, and December was really just a wild month, and I don't know why. We actually had a meeting with John a couple of days ago. And the calls were way up. The billings weren't up as much and the revenue was way down. So some of the data is gonna look a little different, but. And when I looked at December of last year to see if that was normal, it kind of was, where calls are up, but revenue's down. I don't know why. But one thing John mentioned that I'm gonna have to dig into a little bit is when he talks about the ambulance service, he talks more about runs than calls. Like if they get called out somewhere and they don't have to bring the patient back, if it's just a fall, they're able to help them and they just stay home. He doesn't really count that in his numbers. And that, I'm only going by what LifeQuest is putting on the website, so we need to get a little better handle on that. The other thing we did discuss is the person who does the billing is also an EMT and works for the coroner's office or medical examiner's office. But we may bring the part that she does for billing under finance, which is more where Andy came from, where I came from, where everything was kind of under finance. We've had a lot of autonomy among departments here, so it's just been a little different to work with. So that's one thing we're going to work on a little bit. But you can see the aging, like I said, always been right around 500,000. It went up in December, came back down in January. So it seems like we're doing a pretty good job of keeping stuff as current as we can. Especially when you look at the beginnings until now, like the 91 to 120 days out and the 61 to 90 days out. That's improved from May. So that's good movement. There's more on the front end that's current versus more on the back end that might be lagging a little bit.
Question. How does that get billed if they go out and just have to help someone up? And they don't transport that person? Is that still going through LifeQuest, Billy?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Do you, Andy?
No, I think it depends on the level of service they get, even if they don't transfer them. And if he calls it, and we talk to us about it, he calls it a tip off. If somebody just needs help up, they don't need to be in the actual procedures or administer medication. then I don't believe that gets billed at all. It's not even, it doesn't even, it's a call. It's a call out by our dispatch, but it's not a run. They don't create a run sheet for it, which would then go to LifeQuest for billing.
That was a pretty hot discussion back a few years ago, whether we're billing for that or not. Go ahead.
All right. The next slide then is showing average calls per month. And we didn't have a report on this last month, so this is adding 2 months, and you can see our average calls per month went way up. What I'm gonna have to work with the billing person to look at the historical data versus what we're putting in now. If they're historically used calls or runs, like I said, I'm using calls. That could be different than what we had looked at in previous data. And when we get to the last couple of slides, I think that's what's happening. Like we just said, we just filling this out 2 days ago, and the person who does billing isn't here right now. So it's gonna be a few days before we figure this stuff out. Hopefully by the next meeting we will. Both December and January calls were up over 400, which really boosted our average for the 8 months we're out of. Any questions? So then getting to the next slide, average build per month by year. We're really running neck and neck with last year now. And when I say year, it's a running 12-month is what we'll get to until we get a full year of data. So this is including January, so it's crossing over a year. But for the year months we're looking at from May through now January, we're running neck and neck with the previous 12-month cycle, which is still down significantly from the 3 previous years.
The average calls we have they changed much from last year and the year before, and kind of a constant.
That was on the previous slide. It's up from last year, not significantly. It's very similar to 2 years ago. My chart exaggerates the numbers because I have a starting point of 195. So there's not a huge difference between
So
calls per
this
month.
average calls, it's a function of what? How does that change from next year, last year, or 2 years from now, or? How do you predict anything?
You can't
No.
predict that. It's really hard to predict number of calls, really hard to predict potential revenue from those calls. So
And I think the other difference too that throws it off from past years is that the calls also included transfers. And so, and transfers are more of a revenue source. We've been doing the last couple of years, we've been, it's going back, we're doing less and less transfers for hospitals. So like taking somebody from Hayward to Marshfield or Eau Claire, they were doing transfers out of Ladysmith, they were doing transfers out of Grace Lake. But that volume of transfers has gone down significantly in the last couple of years.
Why is that?
In part, I think it's because part of it's our staffing issues. We don't have enough rigs up and running to be able to take one of our rigs and put it out of the county for a period of the day. I mean, availability. So if you're not available, they go to somebody else, and then that just creates them going like right now out of Hayward. We don't get very many transfers. They go with a different service on a pretty regular basis now.
Okay.
And then, you know, so part staffing, but part is also, it's the decision of the hospital on who they want to call to come in and do the transfer for them. And I think that's Hayward. Out of Ladysmith, Race Lake, Marshfield is doing more. Marshfield Clinic has their own services now. So they're using more of their own ambulances to do their transfers.
and the transfers are more guaranteed money. We're pretty high on Medicare and Medicaid, which pays pennies on the dollar, where the transfers are pretty good money. Well, then the next slide is the average collected per month. And again, we're running very similar to the previous 12-month cycle. And then we're down a little bit from, say 1920, but the last 3 years have been relatively similar. The percent, the following slide, percent collected per month. Again, you know, if the first two numbers are the same, percent's got to be about the same, and it is. So Andy, if you want to go to the next slide. You know, both are right around 37%, which is a little bit over the prior 3-year average. So, you know, that's the bottom line with the switch to LifeQuest is we're hoping to get a higher percentage of collection. And at least it's holding its own. It's improved over a couple of years ago, for sure. But again, they had told us we really need 18 months of data before we know how effective the switch has been. We're at about 8 months, so we've got a while to go for that. And then the final slide is kind of the bottom line on, or on this one. So this is where it looks a lot worse than 2 months ago when we looked at it. This is dollars billed and collected per call. So while our billings and revenue stayed fairly flat the last 2 months, our number of calls skyrocketed. And this is where I need to really distill down and see if previous years were calculated by run versus by call. Because if we're having a lot of those calls where we go out and we don't end up billing anything, that's really going to skew our numbers. But at this point, with the data I have, it's down from previous years after it had actually been up. I don't know. I mean, I suppose calls could be due to someone slipping or falling on ice at home. And we get out there and get them in the house and they're all paid and have to bring them in. So I don't know if that's a factor or not. And then the final slide is really just where we're sitting on the ambulance service as a whole. We know that revenue is down, but the expenses are down as well. So we're actually showing, without having the books totally closed, a net grand income of about $45,000. So even though some of the revenue side is down, the expenses down as well, and we're doing okay. Any questions on any of this?
It's good information to have because we want to stay abreast of it. But I don't know enough to ask questions of it.
I think it's gonna help sitting down with the billing person and getting a better idea of what they did in the past versus what we're seeing now. If they went by runs in previous years, that's gonna change the information a lot of it. Make those last calculations look a lot better, the revenue per call and bill per call and revenue per call.
Okay.
Or run, I should say, if it isn't either run.
How are these for staff? Are they shorthanded yet?
Yeah, we're still short, biggest shortfall right now, where it's hurting us the most is paramedics.
Okay.
We have a good supply of basics and we have 1 or 2 openings at the EMT level. But what drives our service is paramedics, because we have a paramedic level service and we're down 3 paramedics there.
So
And most of the transfers require a paramedic, so that's another reason why you maybe not getting as many.
are we still using the chase cars?
Limited amount.
Because I haven't seen them much
Right,
because of paramedics.
right.
Well, it's saving us money anyway.
Yeah, the downside, I mean, recovering, but we have a handful of paramedics that are putting in a lot of overtime to keep us covered, to keep 2 rigs.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Let's go to letter B.
Town of Edgewater discussion, so I think we maybe touched on this briefly last month and then a little bit more public safety. So I had a conversation a couple months ago now with the town chairman from the town of Edgewater, who inquired about having the township essentially removed from the ambulance service. I should be removed. Right now, the town of Edgewater, like the residents of town of Edgewater, like every other resident in the county, the taxpayer, excuse me, gets assessed their portion of the county budget. We have an ambulance levy as part of our county budget for the countywide ambulance service. Basically, the conversation started, could we not include, since the town of Edgewater has an agreement with the Birchwood Ambulance Service to cover the township, could we remove taxing the individuals in the township for their portion of the county ambulance service? That is something we cannot do. It's a countywide levy, it's a countywide ambulance service. Everybody gets assessed their portion of the county levy. There's no way for us, from a practical standpoint, to remove them from the levy. So that brought up a second conversation that's come in. Can we, take the money that we get from the town of Edgewater, that would be their portion of the ambulance levy, and pay their, what I would call it, they get assessed a fee from the Birchwood Ambulance Service to cover their township. Could the county take a portion of our ambulance levy that would equate to what the township of Edgewater pays in and pay their costs to the Birchwood Ambulance Service? Not completely done looking into that. I think that something that could be done potentially. A couple of questions we're still looking into is beyond whether the county would want to do that, is just from a legal liability standpoint. We assess the county for a ambulance service. The county is licensed as a paramedic level ambulance service, and we would be taking ambulance levy money from the county to pay to have the township covered by a basic ambulance service. Does that create any liability issues or legal issues? We haven't gotten an answer. We're still looking into that. And part of the slow reason looking into it is there's not that many counties that run ambulance services on a countywide basis, so there's not a lot of history to pull from other places. So we're just kind of looking into that. And then beyond that, it'd be the question for the committee, and then probably the board to decide whether you want to do that. So it does create some questions as to like, are there other services that townships don't get that they don't think they should have to pay for, and they want you to give them the money to do? Like, these might not be good examples, but just the town of Hayward has their own law enforcement. Should we take part of our levy to support their law enforcement? Or does it create other issues? Does it open up a can of worms, or the slippery slope, whatever little phrase you want to use that would open it up? So I don't have a final answer to tell you whether we can or can't do that, or whether that creates us any other issues on other fronts. The other thing it did bring up that it's not a huge issue, just that we did not find any written agreements with the township as far as when an ambulance call for service comes in from the township. We have been usually sometimes comes to Washburn County to our dispatch, or goes to our dispatch. They dispatch Birchwood, because that's been the past practice. We don't have anything in writing from the township directing us to do that, so we just need to get something more official in place. But the discussion did bring up just how is this being handled, and because we operate a countywide service, we're responsible for all the townships. We should still be, and it's been on and off as it's been occurring. Yes, the Birchwood ambulance gets dispatched, but we should also get our ambulance moving. Should the Birchwood ambulance not be in service, that way our ambulance is already en route. So we've had to revisit that just within internally with dispatch to make sure that's occurring. And if the call goes out to Birchwood, goes up to the Sawyer County ambulance that's closest to respond. If Birchwood starts to respond, then they should call off our ambulance from continuing.
What is Birchwood obligated to use the Birchwood ambulance service?
No, the town, Birchwood, I think there's the village and a few towns. I know one Russ County town of Edgewater. I don't know who else are part of that service. And so they've chosen to be a part and financially support that service, and for them to respond to calls in the township.
Another option is, of course, they could withdraw from that organization, I assume.
They could,
Use only the county.
yeah.
I think the problem is that there's not at the response time. So you wouldn't want to be living in that and wait for somebody to come from Hayward. If you're living in that area. Yeah, so Birchwood is 10 miles away and the response time to the town of Edgewater in that area is way faster than somebody coming from Sawyer. I mean, from Hayward.
But then, you start to establish a bad precedent, like you say, and then how about the places further south in the county? They're a long ways, it's cheaper to go to West County than to come to Sawyer.
I don't think that they have that agreement though, like this is a unique situation, correct?
I'm not sure. Okay.
He's saying that, well, what if the, like, Winter wants to go to Ladysmith then, or something like that?
Yeah, there's no other situation like this in this county. I mean, it's not unusual in other, not even with county ambulance services, but the townships to join an ambulance service that isn't maybe part of their district, because it's a closer response line. But this is the only situation in Sawyer County where I don't know of any other townships in Sawyer County that pay a fee to have another ambulance respond.
If you use that short response time, then any southern spots in the county could argue and say, we want our own and create a new one.
Right.
Yeah.
We have an ambulance station down there too.
The closest ambulance station to Birchwood would be, we have an ambulance in Stone Lake. That station isn't staffed full time. That's run by more on call. So we don't always, that station isn't always up and running to be able to respond to the town of Edgewater.
Isn't it Winter that they have
Ojibwa,
Ojibwa, so there is one down there.
right on the corner, like when you turn to go to Ladysmith?
127.
Yeah.
And I have not gone back and read the history to figure out why Ojibwa was picked as the spot or what the history was with the town of Edgewater as far as getting service from the county ambulance service. I just know that the only thing we found is that, and I think it went by the wayside, but when there's a call in Edgewater, yes, the town of the Birchwood ambulance service gets called out, but the Surrey County ambulance should also be dispatched as well in case, because Birchwood's not always up and running.
So is this also going to public safety to be discussed?
I gave them the same explanation. So the first question is just whether we could do that. I think from a financial standpoint, yes, but because there's a difference in ambulance services and just making sure we can do that, then it would be the question if the board wanted to do that.
I think not having an agreement right now is what we have to, having anything. in
Regardless of
writing.
what happens, we need to get something in
Yeah.
place, just a formality with the township to say, them telling us that, yes, we want you to call Birchwood first,
Mhm.
just to continue doing what we're doing.
But your comparison with the town of Hayward and law enforcement is a great example. Asking why should we help them with their law enforcement rather than use just the county.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I would be first to admit, it's a changing landscape. I was talking to Bayfield County, they've had ambulance issues. I mean, they have like 7, 8, 9 services within Bayfield County. They do not operate a county ambulance, but they're going in the direction of creating a county ambulance service, like almost a virtual one, and levying a county levy for ambulance service. And then they're gonna take that money and they're gonna give it to all the services in the county. To help support them, as they have to help maintain staffing levels up there. But the difference is they're not establishing a ambulance service for the county with a certain level of service. They're just gonna establish the levy to give to the jurisdictions that operate ambulances. At least that's the direction they're going in right now. That's the coming budget, they're looking at doing that.
And I would say before we vote on anything, we have to see what the financial impact. So can we make a motion or have it so that we're just still on this for next month?
Yeah. Yeah, and I have not run the numbers. I think you or somebody had sent me some information that they had looked at the calculation and they're paying, let's just say 50,000 to Birchwood for the service. They believe their portion of the county ambulance levy is 80,000. So their suggestion is pay the 50 to Birchwood and then keep the 30 here. But just have not got fully through that to see if that would work, if we can do that.
Yeah, and that's not a huge impact, but if 5 townships decide to do that,
Yeah,
then our economies of scale get such that they maintain a
well, we need
strong
to make
central.
decisions that set precedents too.
Exactly.
I don't want us to go off course.
No, I mean, I think. This is a pretty transparent situation with what the service that the township is getting and how they're getting it and how we would be able to serve it or not serve it. We've not been serving it. It's not on a regular basis.
Do you have a recommendation that you would bring to the finance? No.
Not today, but
Mhm.
I probably could get to one once.
So if we table it until April, you would have that?
I would leave it on the agenda for April. I'll try-
Okay,
I'll try to have
great.
it ready
I was just waiting for the chair to.
Yeah, definitely leave it on.
Any other questions regarding the Edgewater? Hamlets? Yes,
I don't know if you want, I know this is, but there's been, looks like there's somebody from Birchwood on attending virtually. I don't know if you wanna.
do they have their hand up?
They have not had their hand up, but
Well, I don't know who it is, so. Might just be another taxpayer.
they just unmuted though.
Pardon?
They unmuted. I don't know if they wanted, if they were here. I'm assuming they were here for this discussion, so.
Yeah, this is Vince Fairchild, the ambulance director for Birchwood. Have you got any questions for me?
How's business?
Up and down, kind of like you guys, just trying to figure out how to keep things going. And it's actually, I'll be honest with you, in Birchwood here, we're actually doing quite well. I do have some information I can get to your board for the next meeting. There was a couple of comments that you made about Birchwood not being staffed. We are staffed 24/7. We have no problem covering our calls. And I can get you some more numbers, whatever you guys want to facilitate this, just give me a buzz and we'll put together numbers that you need and we'll move forward. And I do have some information as far as going from paramedic to an EMT service, as far as townships that I'm more than willing to share with you also.
Do you have a full-time paramedic?
No, and we don't need one. We actually are AMT level with what's called flex scheduling. So like your service, your paramedic service. So you've got to have a paramedic available at all times. Where if you go with flex scheduling, if you don't have one available, then you're still able to get that truck on the road with an AEMT level. And that's where we went with flex scheduling. So whoever's available can at least respond and take care of the situation instead of having the truck go down. So we're able to keep our trucks on the road 24/7.
Thank you. Yes,
And in your possession, do you have something in writing that you could share with us of the agreement with Sarah County and Birchwood that
or
for the town of Edgewater?
is there anything in writing?
Yeah.
As far as writing, we do have, let's get together and see what you guys want in writing. I do have some information here though on townships, if they want to go from a paramedic service to a EMT service, on what the legalities of that are. And whatever you guys need going forward, I know Linda's there. She can bring that to one of our meetings. And like I say, give me a call. We'll put together whatever information you guys need. So next time you have a meeting, let's get our ducks in a row. I think going forward, this is going to work out well for all of us. At the end of the day, it's taking care of the community, taking care of the needs. So feel free, reach out to me. I'd appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing.
But how do you not establish precedent on this sort of a decision? I mean, look at like Connors Lake, down in the southeast corner of the county, probably as far away as you can get from Hayward. I can see where if we do this for Birchwood, they might form their own ambulance and say, maybe we go on too. And pretty soon, the county budget's shot, we don't have enough to run the county ambulance. Or the argument you cited, about the town of Hayward Police Department. How do you argue you don't defend, you don't support them if you support Birchwood?
No, that's why I brought it up. I think precedent is one part of the consideration that we put on the table. I mean, we'll get you the information. We'll give you the pros and cons, but that, I mean, when you consider it, precedent is probably one thing to consider. I think,
Well, people like down in Connors Lake, do they bitch about the service that we get? And it's a long ways from the hospital, but
yeah. Not that I know of, but, you know, this situation, or at least at this point, is unique in that this township already has an agreement with another ambulance
yeah,
service.
yeah.
You know, the potential is there for other townships to do that or decide to, you know, on the east side, imagine townships could look at Park Falls. It's just to
Yeah.
come, I honestly don't know distance wise how that equates. Connors Lake could probably down there, it's either West County or again Prentice. Would be maybe the closest. I don't know, those are possibilities. Right now, this is the only township that has
Yeah, yeah.
an agreement with another town, with another service. But yeah, precedent, like Vince said, you know, service to the community is another factor that you're gonna consider, and then the financials, how that works out.
Thanks for doing all that work on that.
Yeah, we'll keep doing the legwork. More to do.
Thank you. Number 13, finance funds update.
Well, as I mentioned, we've got about 50,000 of uncommitted ARPA funds, which from everything we're hearing is probably going to be needed on phase 2 of the requirements. Basically count that as being unofficially committed. Opioid, we had that discussion already, unless there's anything more, and LATCF, we have not done anything with yet.
Remind me what that stands for.
And you're gonna ask.
Local area travel consistency fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was, that has to do with the federal lands within the county,
Mhm.
and that was funding put in that in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, I believe, the bill. So they funded, so counties got payments of 50,000 to on up, depending on how much federal land is in the county.
Okay.
And so that's where we received one allocation last year, and we received the second allocation. They set around the start of the federal fiscal year. But we'll end up with roughly $750,000 there.
Good.
Federal money.
And that's how you can spend that however you want.
That's pretty
Okay. Well, not however you want, but
Right.
okay, got it.
Yeah,
That's
there's
what
not,
county wants.
it's not like the opioid funds where there's a prescribed list of ways to use it. It's basically the same as your regular budget money.
Mhm.
But you do have to account for it and report back on how you spend it.
Thank you.
And how much is that presently?
We have 377,000.
Yeah.
And we can spend it as we see needed.
Pretty much. So we haven't talked about it much for.
Well, it is a finance meeting.
Yep.
So I don't know if it was finance or administrative. We talked about the wages of the employees.
What's to be, now I would,
This is one-time money.
one-time money.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Okay,
You could pay them more, but then you'd have to let them go later on. That would be
yeah,
bad.
yeah, I understand that.
Mhm.
Just trying to think ahead.
Yeah, and honestly, I would, for that discussion, and even, I mean, right now. Without getting into a whole lot of discussion, because it's gonna change, and there's gonna be, at the state level with the state budget. So the governor is included, increase in shared revenue for counties and municipalities. There's also. In his budget, ways that the county could initiate the additional 0.5% sales tax through referendum for the budget. And why it's not worth talking about is because he's proposed his budget.
Yeah, yeah.
The legislature's Could I start working on putting together theirs? They're talking about the same things about changes to the shared revenue formula and giving the local governments more capacity to do things. And we're gonna wait, I mean, you don't wanna wait to see how that plays out. It should, I think something will be coming to the county. But some of it might be geared more towards public safety and wages. Some might be more across the board, some. We're just hopeful that we'll see something here that gives us a little more flexibility. But this is what, March? We're not getting out till June.
Right.
Earliest.
I'll just keep my mouth shut.
Mike, close.
Yes, and that we're not gonna, like, we'll never get 290 million for Miller Park. I mean, that's not gonna.
Yeah. That's good.
Governor also makes a statement that he's repairing roads. And certainly aren't repairing roads in Sawyer County.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always report in, so. Oh, Mr. Slater can give you the report too. Correspondence from conferences and meetings, we'll segue down there.
Okay.
So, Mr. Slater, Mr. Schuman and I were at the county's association legislative conference, and this was a lot of conversation about the budget and assistance to counties. But one day we had the governor at the conference and he talked about his budget, and there's bipartisan support for adjusting the shared revenue formula, and we have this $7 billion of surplus that some of it needs to go back to the local governments for the work they do, for their, having difficulty, whatever. There's that, and then the next day we have the legislative leadership, majority and minority leaders are there, and right away we don't know what the governor was talking about. There's not this much money. We're not gonna do this and this, so.
Yeah.
I don't know if did you hear something else?
Well, I was gonna say a bunch of bullshit, but I won't say that.
So there's just, it's the politics of the states but I think both sides are talking about something. So.
Thank you. So it's back up to number 14, future agenda items. So we want more information on the ambulance billing, and we want more information regarding Edgewater.
How about our real estate taxes, the first installment, are they up or it's not? Anybody read those or?
I haven't heard any reports. I mean, by now, the first installments were paid to the local governments and we should be have done settlements.
Yeah.
With them, but I have not heard of any drop off in collections or any alarms.
I can tell you that our department and the Register of Deeds assisted the Treasurer's Department in sending out about 2,500 delinquent tax letters.
How's that
Sweet.
compared to the other years?
Yeah, that I don't know, but
How many?
about 2,500.
Interesting.
I like how you have the agenda, so.
Thank
We need to keep that LATCF on there, or
Oh, yeah, we're
just keep all that on there.
Yeah.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Just a minute. Also, for future agenda items, and maybe this should just be a conversation outside, but a lot of people have came to me asking questions about transit. And I understand there's probably a lot of things going on at transit. But I don't know how much of it is truth and how much isn't. But one of the questions that came up is who owns the building in Radisson where they store the buses? And I do not remember. I know there was grant money for certain things, and I don't recall what the grant money, what it paid for and what it didn't pay for. So,
There's a building in Madison.
yes, next to the county shop.
I don't think that question was settled back then.
Pardon?
I don't think that question was settled back then, but who owned it?
Well, and I hear rumors, and I'm not going to repeat what I've heard because I don't know that they're true. But it'd be worth looking into. Perhaps, because this is finance and that's part of finance.
But I guess that's my point. We couldn't figure it out back then. All these years that passed.
Well, an example would be the fairgrounds, I mean, the fairgrounds are owned by Sawyer County. Sawyer County really owns the buildings if the fair was to walk away. And this, where the ambulance garage is down there, Sawyer County owns 40 acres there. And is that the same situation? I don't know for sure.
I can look, well, even the transit building here by the highway shop,
Yeah, it's on the same 40.
yeah, it's on county land. I don't see any, I've looked at that, there's no parcel created for the transit,
Right, yep,
so.
that's probably the same situation down there. Maybe something you could look at and let us
Okay.
know. Anybody else have anything else they would like to ask for? If not, thank you for your valuable time. Meeting adjourned.